In the past few years, I've been exploring voice leading, particularly what it means and how to use it in piano playing, composing, and improvising. Voice leading can be summarized in one cardinal rule, which is simply to avoid using the same shape twice in a row. So for an obvious example, if I took a C major triad and moved it up the piano diatonically, this would be bad voice leading. Similarly, if I played any of these chords in root position in a row, it would not be the most effective voice leading. To avoid this kind of bland voice leading, we need to alternate between inversions of these chords. Take a look at this chart. The first line is all of the root position chords in C major, the second line is all of those chords in first inversion, and the third line is all of those chords in second inversion. By avoiding using two chords in a row from the same line, you will always have good voice leading. Now let's try a few progressions. Here are some I've come up with. The only rule applied here is to not use two chords in a row from the same column, or in other words, to not use the same inversion twice in a row. Using this rule, any progression will be solidly voice-led. We can try a few in other keys as well. Now we can see the relative simplicity in which you can generate strong, well-voice-led chord progressions. Once these are established, we can use embellishments or approach notes to add color and rhythmic interest. Let's take, for example, C major. From each chord tone, we can approach from one step above, one step below, two steps above, two steps below, or any free combination of all of these, including chromatics. For another example, here's the same sort of embellishments over D minor over F. Let's hear embellished versions of a few of the above progressions. All of our progressions thus far have been within one key, but we can use voice leading to modulate into other keys as well. C major, for example, as well as being the 1 chord in C, is also the 5 chord of F and the 4 chord of G. So we can use a C chord as a pivot to any of the chords in the G major family or the F major family. And if we allow ourselves to change the quality of each chord, then we can open up even more possibilities. The note C, as well as being in 3 different triads in C major, is also the root of C minor, the 3rd of A flat major, the 5th of F minor, and the root of C diminished, and can be a pivot into each one of those keys' families. Let's go back to a few of our progressions from earlier in this video and modify some of their qualities to modulate into different keys. Now, in real life, you won't always encounter perfectly voice-led chord progressions. In fact, you rarely will. The omnipresent 2-5-1 is technically speaking bad voice leading. However, it's up to us to orchestrate in a way that makes the voice leading as rich as possible. In the case of D minor, G, C, although this root movement is predetermined, let's only look at the notes above the root and make sure that they are well voice-led. You can also use fewer notes. Let's take a look at these examples with fewer notes. You can clearly see a pattern developing here, and it could be continued diatonically as such. We can also use this pattern to pivot into other keys. And these shapes can also be broken up melodically as well. This two-note voice leading is not only harmonically sound, but also pianistically satisfying. Shaping a two-note phrase with voice-led intervals utilizes the natural flexion and extension of the hand. With two-note voice leading, the only rule being not to use the same interval twice in a row, you can pianistically and musically harmonize melodies spontaneously and effectively. Here's an example over Amazing Grace. This sounds more alive than if the melody were simply harmonized in parallel thirds or sixths. We can also freely use voice leading over a pedal point. This will create interesting suspensions, as well as chords that don't really sound exactly like triads, but are still harmonically sound and flowing naturally. Let's try some of our progressions from the beginning again, but now over various pedal points. Now let's hear the two-note harmonization of Amazing Grace over a G pedal. Thinking about voice leading this way does not only apply to the very triadic harmony that we've been using thus far, but even more modern, or lush, or thick harmonies are more effective if sound voice leading is at its foundation. Let's go back to our progressions from the beginning of this video, but now use more liberal definitions of each chord quality and freely use ninths, 11ths, and 13ths. So all of this is derived from the one cardinal rule of voice leading, which is to avoid using the same shape twice in a row. Why does this rule exist anyways? At the piano, we are spoiled by the availability of our 10 fingers, immediate accessibility of 7 octaves, and the relatively straightforward layout of pitches at the keyboard. However, we have to remember that the piano, like all musical instruments, is essentially imitative of the human voice. And each note in a chord is not merely a button being pressed that works within the chord change, but actually a voice with its own melodic function. By avoiding using the same shapes in all of our chord voicings, we remove predictability from our harmony, activate internal melodies within chord changes, and effectively bring harmony to life.